The year is 1092. The location is the heart of the mighty Seljuk Empire. The Grand Vizier Nizam al-Mulk, the most powerful man in the Islamic world, is being carried in his litter towards his tent. A ragged Sufi mystic approaches him, begging for alms. The guards step aside, allowing the holy man to get close. But as the beggar reaches out, a flash of steel cuts through the air. A hidden dagger plunges into the vizier's chest. The beggar is killed instantly by the guards, but he dies smiling. He does not fear death. He welcomes it, because he is a Fedai, an angel of death sent by the old man of the mountain. This was not just a murder. It was a message that no wall is high enough, no army is big enough, and no armor is thick enough to protect you from the long arm of Alamut. Before the ninja, before the modern special forces, there was a sect so terrifying that their very name became the word for political murder in almost every European language: the Assassins. Who were these men who threw their lives away with such fanatical obedience? Did their leader, Hassan-i Sabbah, really drug them with hashish and trick them into believing they had visited paradise? Or is that just a myth invented by their enemies? From the eagle's nest of Alamut to the daggers under the pillows of sultans, this is the true story of the world's first terrorist organization. To understand the darkness, we must first understand the light of the man who cast it. Hassan-i Sabbah was not born a monster. He was a genius. Born in the city of Qom in Persia around 1050, he was a voracious student of mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Legend says he studied alongside Omar Khayyam, the great poet. But while Khayyam looked at the stars, Hassan looked at the flaws of the world. He converted to the Ismaili sect of Shia Islam, a minority group persecuted by the ruling Sunni Seljuk Empire. Hassan was a man on the run, a revolutionary with a price on his head. He realized that he could never defeat the massive Seljuk armies on the battlefield. He needed a new kind of war, asymmetric warfare. He didn't need thousands of soldiers. He just needed a few men who were willing to die. But first, he needed a base, a sanctuary where the Seljuk cavalry could not reach him. He found it in the Elburz Mountains, south of the Caspian Sea, a fortress perched on a rock so high and steep that it was said only eagles could reach it. Alamut, the eagle's nest. In 1090, Hassan didn't conquer Alamut with blood. He conquered it with his brain. He infiltrated the fortress, converted the garrison to his cause, and then politely paid the commander 3,000 gold dinars to leave. He had his castle. Now he needed his weapon, the hashish. The legends of Marco Polo tell us a fantastic story. He wrote that Hassan created a secret garden in the valley behind the castle, a garden filled with milk and honey, exotic flowers, and beautiful women. He would drug young men with hashish, putting them into a deep sleep. When they woke up, they were in the garden. They were served wine, caressed by women, and told they were in paradise. After a few days of bliss, they were drugged again and woke up back in the cold stone castle. Hassan would tell them, "If you want to return to that paradise forever, you must kill the target I give you and die in the process." It is a compelling story, but historians largely reject it. The term hashishin was likely a derogatory insult used by their enemies to call them outcasts or druggies. The truth is far more terrifying than drugs. Hassan didn't use opium to control his men. He used faith. He used intense intellectual indoctrination. The Fedais were highly educated. They learned the languages of their enemies, the customs of foreign courts, and the art of disguise. A Fedai could pose as a Christian monk, a Jewish merchant or a Sunni soldier for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They were sleeper agents. The psychological warfare of Alamut was masterful. Hassan knew that fear was a more powerful weapon than death. The Seljuk Sultan Sanjar once marched his army to destroy Alamut. One morning, the Sultan woke up in his heavily guarded tent. He found a dagger stuck into the ground right beside his head. Under the dagger was a note from Hassan. "If I did not wish the Sultan well, that dagger which was struck into the hard ground would have been struck into your soft breast." The Sultan was terrified. How did they get in? Who could he trust? His own guards? His own family? The Sultan turned his army around and made peace with the assassins. This was Hassan's true power. He made the most powerful kings in the world afraid to go to sleep. But they didn't just target Muslims. During the Crusades, the assassins became a third player in the war for the Holy Land. They killed whoever threatened their interests, regardless of religion. Their most famous Christian victim was Conrad of Montferrat, the king of Jerusalem. Two assassins disguised themselves as Christian monks. They gained Conrad's trust over months, praying with him, eating with him. Then, as Conrad walked home from a bishop's house, they stabbed him. One assassin was killed instantly. The other was captured and tortured to reveal his master. He laughed during the torture, claiming he was happy to die for the old man of the mountain. This fearlessness deeply disturbed the Crusaders. They brought the word assassin back to Europe, cementing the legend. However, the most fascinating interaction was between the assassins and the great Saladin. Saladin, the hero of Islam, wanted to crush this heretical sect. He laid siege to their castle at Masyaf in Syria. One night, Saladin woke up to see a shadow leaving his tent. The lamps had been moved. Beside his bed he found hot scones of the type the assassins ate, and a poisoned dagger with a note pinned to it. Saladin, the man who defeated Richard the Lionheart, was shaken. He understood that he could win battles, but he could not win against a ghost. He lifted the siege. The assassins had secured their survival through sheer terror. Life inside Alamut was not the paradise of legend. It was a place of rigid discipline. Hassan-i Sabbah was a fanatic of the highest order. He banned music and wine. He was so strict that he executed his own two sons, one for drinking wine and the other for a crime he didn't even commit. He spent the last 35 years of his life inside his library in Alamut, never leaving the castle, only leaving his room twice to go to the roof. He wrote theological treatises and plotted the deaths of kings, creating a network of fortresses that stretched across Persia and Syria. He died of natural causes in 1124, but the monster he created lived on for another 130 years. But all things must end. The assassins thought they were invincible in their mountain fortresses, but they had never met a force like the Mongols. In the 1350s, the Mongol horde, led by Hulagu Khan, swept across the Middle East like a plague of locusts. The Mongols didn't care about religion, and they didn't fear assassination. When a Mongol commander was killed, they didn't retreat. They slaughtered a whole city in retaliation. The assassins tried to assassinate the great Khan. It was a fatal mistake. You do not poke the dragon. Hulagu Khan brought Chinese engineers with him. They built massive siege engines, trebuchets that could hurl stones up the steep cliffs of Alamut. The assassins, who had laughed at Seljuk armies for a century, watched in horror as their walls crumbled. The last Grand Master of Alamut, Rukn al-Din Kurshah, was a weak man compared to Hassan. He surrendered the fortress in 1256, hoping for mercy. The Mongols promised him safety. They accepted his surrender, dismantled the castle, and burned the famous library of Alamut. Countless books of philosophy, astronomy, and Ismaili theology were turned to ash. A priceless treasure of human knowledge, lost forever. And then, once the castles were destroyed, the Mongols revealed their true nature. They rounded up the assassins and slaughtered them. Rukn al-Din was trampled to death by horses. The order was shattered. The eagle's nest was empty. The assassins were destroyed as a political power, but they were not exterminated. The Ismaili community survived. They went underground, shedding their militant skin and returning to their roots as a peaceful spiritual sect. Today, the Ismailis are known for their emphasis on education, culture, and humanitarian aid, led by the Aga Khan. It is a supreme irony of history. The descendants of the most feared killers in the world are now some of the most peaceful philanthropists. But the shadow of Alamut remains. Hassan-i Sabbah invented the playbook for the modern insurgent, the sleeper cell, the targeted assassination, the idea that a small dedicated group can paralyze a superpower through fear. He proved that you don't need an army to change history. You just need a dagger and the will to use it. When we play video games or watch movies about the assassins today, we see them as freedom fighters in white hoods, fighting against tyranny. But the reality was far more complex. They were not fighting for freedom. They were fighting for their own survival and their own version of truth. They were the ultimate fanatics. Imagine standing on the ruins of Alamut today. The wind howls through the broken stones. The library is gone. The gardens are dust. But if you listen closely, you might hear the echo of the old man's voice whispering to his Fedais. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. A phrase often attributed to them, perhaps falsely, but fitting for a group that lived and died in the shadows. So, if you were a young man in the 11th century, searching for purpose in a chaotic world, would you have taken the dagger? Would you have climbed the mountain to serve the old man, believing you were buying a ticket to paradise? Or would you have been the vizier, sleeping with one eye open, knowing that death could be the beggar asking for a coin?